whatever the crack in the surface may be, that you can't view yourself or treat yourself with compassion, really looking at, well, where did that message come from?
Welcome to Shaping Freedom with Lisan Basquiat, the podcast where we help you unlock your potential and redefine what it means to be free. I'm your host, Lisan Basquiat. I'm a former corporate executive, a life strategist, and the founder of Shaping Freedom. With a background spanning corporate, artistic, and personal development, I bring a unique perspective to empowering others. Listen in to discover inspiring stories and practical insights that will help you reclaim your life and rewrite your narrative. My intention is for you to gain the tools and motivation to be free in your relationships, your communities, and within yourself. This, my friends, is Shaping Freedom. Welcome to Shaping Freedom. I'm your host, Lisan Basquiat. I'm going to read a quick quote to you. You are not stuck. It isn't that it's impossible. You just haven't figured it out yet. That quote was by today's guest, Dr. Amber L. Howlett, PhD. And today we're exploring what being stuck looks like and how to get unstuck. We also talked about how to unravel the twisted self-view that society sometimes doles out, and about what it means to feel fine as frog hair. If you're tired of living your life for someone else, this is the conversation for you. Here is my discussion with Dr. Amber L. Howlett, PhD. Hello, Amber. How are you? It's so nice to meet you.
Hi, Lisan. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for agreeing to join on such short notice.
Are you kidding me? You could have called me this morning and asked me and it would have been a yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. One of the things that I really want, what I find so unique and refreshing about your approach to the work that you do, is your focus on mindset. You know, the ways that our life experiences are informed by the ways that we think and the ways that we see things. And I was thinking about having this conversation in kind of three parts, right? One is I'd love to talk to you a bit about your journey. Like, how did you get here to this place, doing the work that you're doing, informing the world in the way that you are? And then the second part would be to focus on helping people to understand how to get unstuck, because so many of us are.
Absolutely.
And then the third would be to talk about like what's happening in the world and some of the anxiety and stress that people are feeling. I think that we can create some pretty powerful medicine for the world. So those are kind of the three things, the three topics that I wanted to cover during this conversation.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So thank you so much for joining. Today we have Dr. Amber Howlett-Bayoc. Have I pronounced your name correctly?
Correctly, yes.
Who is the founder of Dharma Management and who is also a PhD who focuses on helping people to, I guess, get unstuck. I'd love to hear a little bit before we really dive into it. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and how you got to contributing in the way that you are today.
How I got here today, I would say, is a combination of my bounce back from trauma, really from a lot of white spaces and white systems that really don't serve Black women, so to speak. So it was really unraveling all of that, or attempting to try to unravel all of that, and manage to keep myself in terms of not becoming unhealthy in a way that meant that I had to rely on medications, or that I could still keep all of my mental faculties. So really Dharma Management came to be just because I realized that I can't be the only woman in that circumstance, and we have to do something.
Yeah. For sure. And what is the circumstance specifically that you're addressing? in your work?
What I specifically address is I've worked a number of jobs. Going back to my background is counseling and psychology, and I picked that particular field because I felt like it was it could be a very general field. And I don't like my workday to look the same. I love variety. And so I've been able to have a job or a career in a number of fields, from anywhere from medicine to education, to health. But one thing that was consistently the same is that I found myself being in a position of working so hard to prove myself that I deserve to be promoted, that I deserve to have a pay raise, that I deserve to have this particular title, that my education should substantiate, and my work experience and the work that I'm producing should be enough to show you fill in a blank. And so many times it was not. And after feeling like being in those positions and feeling really very stuck, and then one day just coming to a conclusion that I thought that I would always work for somebody else because that felt secure. But then it's like, okay, so now maybe you have this perceived security that you think you have, but you're miserable. So it's like, which do you want more? Do you want the perception of security, or do you really want, in the long term, your mental health, your physical health, your ability to feel joy, and your ability to not have to prove yourself and be a part of those systems anymore, and to create your own? And so I took the leap and decided to do something different.
I love that. And I think those are the stories that people really do need to hear, because there are so many people, and I did it at one point in my life as well, where I went into corporate because I felt like that was the thing to do. And it certainly was in my household, and got there, and I had never felt as Black and as unqualified, I guess, as I felt during the years that I worked in corporate. And I worked there for a long time. And it was a very different environment for me, because I grew up as a first generation Haitian.
Okay.
And I'm from Brooklyn.
Okay.
And when you talk about Brooklyn, it's New York, but it's Brooklyn. It's very specific. It's a very specific place, and there's a very specific culture there. And then I stepped into the corporate world, and I started to see where I really was in a landscape that I wasn't familiar with, and didn't really know, stepping into it, how to navigate, and had to learn like what the game was. You know, what the game was, what work really was, and how it differed from what I believed it to be, which was hard work. Get in there, show them what you can do, and you would be rewarded. You'll be rewarded for that.
Yeah, they've done a good job of convincing us of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to someone last night and I'm not going to get too deeply into politics here, because we could talk about that all day. But the person asked kind of a rhetorical question about why Kamala Harris deserved a person's vote. And I stopped for a moment, and my back kind of went up a little bit in the conversation. And then I took a step back, and I thought, and it could have been in preparation for this conversation, I said, it's really interesting that the question is being asked why this person deserves a vote. And that this person, with all the hard work that's done, and all of the ways that this individual, and it could be anyone, there are millions of Kamala Harrises in the world.
Yes,
okay.
there are.
So this isn't specific to this political situation, nor to this woman. But more, it speaks to more the ways that women are consistently put in this position of having to prove themselves. And that when there's an option between two, the woman, this Black woman, is put in a position of having to prove herself
Mm-hmm.
versus, why does this person deserve a vote? What makes this person more qualified than the other? So I think it's just like the external representation of the experience of so many people.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, and I feel like we're continuing to have the same conversations that like our aunts would have had, or that our mothers had, or that our grandmothers had. And it's like we're in 2024, we're almost in 2025, and we're still having the same conversations.
Yeah. So what has happened? Because I think your approach and what you shared about your own professional background is in some ways unique, because you seem to have got it and decided early on to do something about it. What was it about your experience and what you brought to the table that helped you to see things a little more clearly?
Well, clearly I have fooled you into thinking that I was like really ready to take this leap and, and that I had it all together.
There's a journey here. That's what I want to hear about. I want to hear about that journey.
Oh, man, it was a long journey getting here. I will try to keep it as short and packed in as possible. But I think like what has happened to me, I've had some really great people in my life. And my father is recently deceased as of 2 years ago. But
I'm sorry to hear that.
Like, thank you. The way that most people talk about their moms is like the way that I feel and like my family feels about my father. So my father and I were really very close. I had a grandmother that was really very involved, and losing the two of them, it wasn't a devastating thing, but definitely like noticing the loss in the physical sense. And one of the things that I've tried to do in terms of losing people is to really sit with grief and figure out what is it exactly that I'm missing besides the physical thing about them. And with my grandmother, it was her ability she only had a third grade education, but she would often hold court on her porch for all the women in the neighborhood. And of course, we weren't supposed to be listening. Like we're supposed to be in the house somewhere, but it was really very intriguing to me to watch this group of women get together and to nurture and hold each other up and listen to one another and to put each other back together after the breakdowns. And so when my grandmother left this earth, I realized like that's something that I picked up from her, which really made the counseling and the psychology piece really interesting to me. And so that's why I took that road. But I wanted to be able to give that back to other people so that a piece of her would always be here in giving back to people in that way. And with my father was one where he supported everybody's dreams. Like he was a bus driver. He retired as a bus driver. And one of the things that he would say is that I get to drive people to the places that they want to go every day or need to go so that they can support their families. And I get to push their dreams forward in that way. I never thought about bus driving.
That is powerful.
Never thought about bus driving like that before. But I realized that in my father, that's the thing that I miss most about him, is watching him nurture other people's dreams. And so for the longest of time, I said, I just want to be able to help people make their dreams come true and not have to worry about how my bills were going to be paid. And little did I know that I would eventually find a way to help people bring their dreams to fruition and also be able to pay my bills with doing it. So it's in emulating the people who meant the most to me that at least gave me the vision of it. And how I got there is basically because I feel like my back was against the wall. I'm in a job where I'm being paid well, but they're paying me to do a job that is really beneath my skill set and against my interests, quite honestly. And I felt pigeonholed. And I was in a position where my husband is an artist. My husband's manager, that wasn't working out. They turned around and they left. And my husband kept saying, like, you're the right person for this position. Like, I don't even understand why you go to work every day. Why do you work a job where you're not happy? And you would have to know, at the time, he was my boyfriend and he was very new as a boyfriend. And he has such a good and caring heart that at one point in time, Amber would have popped off and been like, you gonna pay my bills if I like, why you all up in my business? But because I knew that wasn't the space he was coming from. And when I really had to sit and reflect, like saying to pay my bills didn't seem good enough anymore. So he was like, what are we doing then? Like, I need representation. You hate your job. What are we doing? And I was supposed to, in my position, give at least a 90-day notice. And I held on to it for the longest, and they kept piling stuff on. And at lunch, which is usually my rebellion, I write a note, and I'm like, I'm resigning, and this is it. And I gave them like a little less than 2 weeks notice, and that was a wrap.
Good
That
for
was a wrap.
you. Good for you. There are a few things in that I think are so powerful. First of all, I would say that while your father drove a bus to take people from one place to the next, to take them from where they were to where they wanted to be, I think that in some ways you're doing the same work in moving people from wherever it is that they are to where they want to be. You know, just the simplicity of that.
Thank you for that perspective. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think that there are so many ways that we take things from the people who are around us, who are teaching us and programming us every day. And sometimes we don't right off the bat understand what the lesson is or what the guidance is.
Absolutely.
You know? But that was the first thing I thought about as you were describing what your father said and the work that he did. It's like, well, that's what you're doing. So there's that. Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing that comes to mind is the power in being willing to connect to your heart and to connect to what's best for you versus responding or reacting to your then boyfriend's suggestion. You know, because you're right. There are a lot of people who would be like, what are you talking about? When, you know, how am I, you telling me what to do? Right. You know, what you doing? You're trying to take something away from me. When in fact, what I hear in that is that you and your now husband had the ability to come together and collaborate and partner in a way that was mutually beneficial so that he could have representation from someone who he trusted and who he knew loved him and cared for him. And you had the ability to have the freedom to do more of what you wanted to do. You know, so I think there's really a beautiful lesson in that for people.
Thank you. And it was the push that I needed, the push that was there all along, you know, the nudgings. But yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. I worked in corporate for a long time, and at the time, you know, I had a good paycheck. You know, I was fine. You know, I was earning a good salary. You know, I put on my whatever and went into financial services and did the thing every day. And I wasn't miserable necessarily. Like, I don't have a lot of nightmare stories relating to that work, but I knew that there was something in my soul that wasn't being filled. And I knew that there was so much more that I could contribute that I could not realize working and doing the things that I was doing in my life at that time. And I'd love to hear if you have one, was there, so I understand, like, you decided to quit this job and you decided to go and represent your then boyfriend. Was there a kind of a radical point? You mentioned trauma in the beginning of this conversation. Was there a moment? Is there a defining moment for you?
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear about that.
Absolutely. Defining moment for me was studying in graduate school. And I say that my parents prepared us really well in terms of, I'm from East St. Louis, Illinois. And if you remember, not getting political either, but we had a president who is now president elect who made the comment of East St. Louis being a cesspool on national TV on his platform. And my parents, they're wonderful people from East St. Louis all over, but my parents made certain that you're growing up in this area, but we need to expose you to other places and other people and other things, and you're doing things outside of your community. Did an excellent job at that. But I say the one thing that they could not have prepared me for, been around a number of white people, but white people in privilege, like with money, like that was just something that they couldn't get me ready for. And so being in that kind of higher ed environment and encountering the kind of like covert racism that I dealt with, like I ended up gaining like 65 pounds while I was studying, and I was having heart palpitations and I was feeling dizzy. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor was talking about putting me on blood pressure medication. And my parents were not on blood pressure medication. So that was laughable to me. And I'm like, yeah, that's just not,
That's not it.
Yeah. So I have to figure out something else to do. So I went and did research on like what would be possible. And I wasn't even concerned about the weight because like I always say that I was curvy and like I thought I was fine as frog hair. Like I loved being 265 pounds and strutting in the room. Like you couldn't tell me anything about my appearance at all. Okay?
I've never heard fine as frog hair.
That's my grandmother.
I've never heard that, but I'm going to use it.
Please do.
I intend to use that.
I mean, I was bringing all of me in the room. So I thought I was great, right? So the weight wasn't a concern for me. It was the blood pressure that was the concern. So I'm looking for ways to reduce my blood pressure, and I come across acupuncture as a possibility. So I'm like, okay, decide to go to acupuncture, and it's in a very white community that I decide to go in, but I go in and the acupuncturist is a Black woman. And so she does this assessment. She's able to, all she did was just put her fingers on my pulse points, and she was able to like read my whole life story. And
I've had that. Yeah.
Listen, I had the unmitigated gall to ask her after she did all of this, because I'm very educated, and none of this at this point is making sense to me, that she's doing all of this. And so she gets ready to do the treatment, and I say to her, well, aren't you going to give me papers to fill out? And immediately in my mind, I'm thinking quack. Aren't you going to give me papers to fill out so that you can find out about all my medical things? And she said, do I really need to give you a piece of paper after all the things I just told you? And I well, no, you don't. But again, how those systems are ingrained in us about this is the way that it's supposed to look, right? And so she puts these needles in, and like I'm knocked out on her table, and it is the best sleep that I've ever had, and I don't know how long. But I continued to see her, and I ended up like changing my diet. She mentioned yoga to me, which I'm like, Black people don't do yoga. And she's like, yes, they do yoga, Amber. And so I ordered these DVDs and I started doing yoga, in my house. And then I ended up becoming a yoga instructor and started teaching children yoga. And I thought it would be a great way to teach children how to regulate their emotions so that they can make better decisions. Because I feel like in the communities that I am predominantly in and where I'm from, I don't feel like children are always given what feels like ample opportunity to make decisions and to make sound decisions. I feel like they're almost put in this microwavable kind of situation, and they're making like really fast responses with their kid brains, if that makes sense. And so I'm like, I really believe that yoga can be a way so that they can even breathe, like while the other person is talking, to be able to regulate themselves. And perhaps we'll see less fill in the blank, less incidents of going to the principal office, less incidents of fights, perhaps, or whatever it may be. So I started teaching children yoga, and my yoga practice got deeper. And so as my practice got deeper, that's really when Dharma Management began to unfold, just in looking at ways for people to be able to make shifts in themselves, shifts in their perspectives, shifts in their beliefs, shifts in their behaviors, shifts in their practices. And so that's what it was really born out of, is trying to figure out a way to save myself, and not caring about getting a degree being the end result, but being able to save myself and get through it, or to jump off the ship.
Do you know that we have a line of Shaping Freedom wellness products? Each are beautifully crafted and designed to support you in cherishing your mind, body, emotions, and soul. Carve out a sanctuary in your life with our Luxe sustainable yoga and meditation mats, essential oil candles, and more. Embrace self-care and reflection with every item, lovingly created to enhance your daily practice of spending time on you. Elevate your wellness journey with Shaping Sanctuary Collection because you deserve to feel balanced, nurtured, and inspired. Visit shapingsanctuary.com for more information.
Exactly. Yeah. Huh. I think that children are programmed, and the work that you're doing and the work that you did working with children and practicing with children is a way of teaching them. I think that so often it's, we've turned children and ourselves into robots.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That is how we move from health to disease, or how we move from so far away from ourselves sometimes that we no longer recognize who we are because we're on autopilot in a
Yes.
world that is working very hard to convince us that we are to move away from our humanness in order to be better. I heard a speech that you did. I think it was at a school on YouTube. And you jotted down, you said, society capitalizes on our insecurities and gets into our psyche. I don't know if you remember saying that specifically. Yes. I would love for you to share a little bit more about what you meant by that.
I think society does an excellent job of holding a mirror up to us, in a sense that it's like one of the carnival mirrors, if you've ever been through, where everything
distorted.
is kind of and disjointed, and it's not the way that it really is. Like, it's a mirror, but it's not the best mirror in which to see yourself. And so there's a reason that, you have things like the Great Depression, or you have things like recessions, and you still have cosmetic companies that are able to thrive. And you're constantly faced with these images of women, men, whoever it may be, that are airbrushed, that are, like, they're not real images at all. So, your lips are too big, so you need to do this to fix your lips. Your hair is too frizzy, so you need to do that. Your hair needs to be straighter. Like, all these different things that needs to happen. And so I feel like you're constantly holding up what's supposed to be this picture of perfection to us, and at the same time telling us, because they know that nobody really looks like that at all, but at the same time telling us that we're not good enough. And so if you want to compete on this end, if you want to have the person of your dreams, if you want to have the job of your dreams, if you want to go on vacations and be happy, and then these are the things you need to purchase, and these are the things you need to be vested in.
So everything in the world, everything in our lives is about image.
It really is.
Look like
really
this.
It
Even
really is.
Going on vacation or doing these things that could be very personally fulfilling, taking a walk, whatever they are, the world has a way of pulling us away from ourselves. And I think that the biggest joke in all of it is that we see the photos, we know they're airbrushed, and yet it still drives and informs the way that young women perceive their own beauty and perceive their own perfection, and the ways that young men learn how, what it's like, or how they're supposed to show up in the world physically. It's like, it's all this big joke.
It is.
And the joke's on us.
And it's everywhere. Like, it's coming through our TVs. If you're not a TV watcher, it's coming through your computers. If you don't have to watch videos or whatever it is, you don't have to be dialed into social media. Like, it's all around.
It's there. Yeah. So from within that, I think one of the things that's so powerful about you and and the work that you're here to do is that you have a way of helping people to wade through and dismantle some of that. So I'd love to move into, you said something about being stuck, helping people to get unstuck. How does a person know that they're stuck?
If you feel hopeless in the situation that you're in, that there is nothing else, that you've reached the pinnacle of who you are, where you are, what you're doing, and you're unhappy, then you're stuck. If there are things that you want to do with your life, but you say, oh, I could never do blah, blah, blah because of fill in the blank, you're stuck.
Yeah.
If you believe that those things only happen to other people, that they never happen to someone like you, you're stuck.
I like that you started with feeling happy, because I think there are so many people who believe that happiness is fleeting or that it's something that's unreachable and that we're not meant to be happy, which I resist with every fiber of my being.
Oh, I agree.
And it's not connected to money or status or whether you're in a relationship or not in a relationship or any of those things.
No.
What can a person do to start to become unstuck or to start to move themselves toward feeling a little more joy in their lives, or a lot more joy?
I think self-examination is huge. I am often surprised by the number of people who work intentionally to not spend time with themselves and to not hear their thoughts. And by that, what I mean is that there's constant chatter around them, whether it's the radio that's always on or the TV that's always on, or it's always something that they have to attend to. But to me, it's like you're working really very diligently to not hear the inner thought of, I'm not happy, I want to do something else, or I'm happy, but there's something more that I would love to do. So with starting there, with asking people like, when's the last time that you connected to your heart? When's the last time that you asked yourself what it was that you needed? When's the last time your body told you something that it needed and you actually listened to it? And starting there and starting those conversations with people, and having a lot of people saying, I've never done those things before, or I don't have time to do those things.
And very often they have time to ask other people those same questions. Rolls right off their tongue. Right? How are you doing, girl? What's going on? Let me help you. And then not being willing to actually turn those very loving and caring questions on ourselves.
Absolutely.
I often say that, the longest and most intimate relationship that we'll ever have is the one that you're in with yourself.
Preach. Yes.
And it requires all of the same attention, all of the same compassion, all of the same throwing on the cape and being a shiro that we often roam through life bestowing upon other people. And then we're exhausted.
Yes.
Black women are, in my opinion, the most exhausted of all, because we're working through all of the issues that are specific to women, globally. And then we have just that added few layers.
Look, and again, it's coming through the walls all the time.
Yeah.
About these added things that you're supposed to do. Like, we've really been sold this whole story about we're supposed to take care of people, and you get to yourself later, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, maybe. And then we're exhausted and we're outside of ourselves and we're physically unhealthy and mentally exhausted and emotionally fraught. And I would love to see a world where we start to really talk about that and talk about it from a place of love and have that revolution that you talk about, from a place of love versus this constant criticism of each other and of ourselves, pointing out everything that's wrong. I loved your frog hair. What'd you say? Finest frog hair. I love that, because what that looks like is you love you and you accept where you are and know that you are empowered to do whatever it is that you want to do to change that situation if you so choose. But it has to start from this basis of love, of self-love and self-care.
It really does. It really does. And then examining whatever the crack in the surface may be, that you can't view yourself or treat yourself with compassion, really looking at, well, where did that message come from? Where did the message come from that you're supposed to be a certain size? Who told you that if you do this thing that it's going to cause this? And really having people look at that. Like, sometimes people legitimately don't think about what they've picked up along the way from other people and how they've carried that with them throughout their lives, and just how impacted they are by it. So helping them to see that and helping them to shift from that perspective, and then developing their very own belief systems about who they are and what they're capable of. Does it come overnight? No, but I think just the willingness to be able to ask the question of, where did this come from? And why do I believe it? And why am I holding on to it?
I jotted down this developing your own belief systems, because I think that that's kind of the bottom line of the work that you do. It's helping people to develop and create their own belief systems. And so often people kind of take what they've learned and what they've experienced and the patterns and cycles that are around them, and they just roll them forward.
Because it's easy.
Because it's easy. I think it's simple.
Yes. That's a better way to put it. I agree.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's hard living. It's really hard living. But it's very simple to just, because what it does is it helps a person, believing that helps a person to not be accountable for their results. And to sit on the laurels of, well, this is how I was raised, or this is what they told me, and I'm going to take that and move it forward. And I don't have to I can throw my hands up and not take responsibility or accountability for those results. And I think that what's so beautiful and admirable about your work and what you've done and what you're choosing to do with your life is that you are taking that step back to really very consciously decide how you've designed your life and how you're going to help other people to do the same.
That's the hope. That's
important work.
That's something that I'm doing and that I'm giving to people.
Are you?
When I hear it, there are things that people hear from me that feel very profound to them, but feel very everyday to me. And so that is always the push in terms of, like, when we talk about telling stories, and I'm just thinking like, this is so common, like this is every day, and but I'm finding that it's not. Like, people are saying like, no, this is not common. This is not what happens. And so the work that you're doing is great work, where for me, it just feels like it's Wednesday and this is what we do on Wednesday.
But you're choosing to share. And I think that's the important thing. I think our lives, we have this journey, all of us, and you're triumphing through, you've triumphed through feeling stuck yourself, or through, a job or a professional life that didn't feed you, to other things that you've experienced in your life. And I think it's the willingness to tell that story and the language within the telling of that story that resonates with other people.
I appreciate you saying that, because that's another thing that I often talk about, is the vulnerability in that. And I don't think that Black people especially, I will say, and I can only speak from a Black perspective because that's what I know, and I'm not the voice of Black people, but I feel like we aren't often welcomed or allowed to be vulnerable. And so because we're not given that opportunity, I think that also becomes the armor in which we hold on to things, and that we don't release and let go and that it just continues to perpetuate this cycle. And so I will say being able to be in safe spaces that people have created, and just the ability to be vulnerable and to be able to say, I don't know, but let's work together and figure it out. Or I don't know, and I don't really have to know, and I don't care to know. Like, it's a very freeing thing. And again, it sounds simple, but I feel like so often we are put into positions, especially Black women, to have all the answers and all the know-how about something. Or that whole thing about not being wrong also. I found that the ability to just fall on a sword, like, I'm really good at falling on a sword and just saying, all right, it wasn't my intention to do whatever, and I'm really very sorry that blah, 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 blah. And I'm finding that really like frees people up to just talk.
It's the truth telling. It's the truth telling. And I think that programming is prevalent. So how do you start to unravel that? How does, there's a lot of talk about becoming more vulnerable. And I think that if there is any group of people who struggles with that, it's, Black men and Black women. And I'm going to speak, as a Black woman, I'm going to speak to the experience of a Black woman. And I never really understood. People would say, you should be more vulnerable. And I didn't understand at the time what that even meant. Like, what is that? What's this thing? What's this, weak thing? I'm strong. Vulnerable's weak,
Do you know that we have a line of Shaping Freedom wellness products? Each are beautifully crafted and designed to support you in cherishing your mind, body, emotions, and soul. Carve out a sanctuary in your life with our luxe sustainable yoga and meditation mats, essential oil candles, and more. Embrace self-care and reflection with every item, lovingly created to enhance your daily practice of spending time on you. Elevate your wellness journey with Shaping Sanctuary Collection, because you deserve to feel balanced, nurtured, and inspired. Visit shapingsanctuary.com for more information.
So what are the signs for someone who might be in that position today? How do you know that vulnerability could be a medicine?
I know that vulnerability can be a medicine, because vulnerability is when you are being your truest self. And when you're allowed to be, and when I say allow, I mean, not someone else giving you that permission, but you giving yourself that permission. When you allow yourself to show up and be your truest self, I mean, I think that is a nut that is cracked, and it begins to open up you and the doors to so many other possibilities. It's not caring what other people think about the fact that I cry every Tuesday because this is the headspace that I'm in. It's like, okay, so what that people know that I cried? Like, it's fine. But it's you. And the more that you start telling your truth and tell your story, I just think the more you that evolves and moves forward and comes forth. Like, you're breaking out of this. What's a good word for that? You're breaking out of this bondage, whether it's self-imposed. Yeah, whether it's self-imposed or whether it's imposed by society and community. Like, it's just saying no.
And what does that look like? Let's create a few steps for a person, because I think this is a really tough doorway to walk through for so many Black women in particular. Agree. Because if I walk through that door, if I do that thing, then everything that I've been holding up with this hard heart and these walls is going to come crumbling down. And it can seem overwhelming to step into that, step out on the wild side. So for that woman, for the woman who's holding it all up, and she knows that it's time. She knows that her relationships are hanging by a thread. she knows that she's not showing up in the world that she truly, in the way that she really wants to show up, that there's something different inside that's happening outside. How do we help her to walk through that door?
I think it begins with making certain that this woman has the proper resources around her, that it's not just me or you that's working with her one-on-one, because that may be a very, for a short time period and also in a short span. But if she's surrounded in resources of where she can go to for when, like, we begin cracking the surface of things when we're not around, she knows that she can go to this particular space and share whatever. So number one, with building, putting proper cushions in place, so to speak, for what's going to come out. And for two, I think that there's a lot of coming into the work. And I say this, and perhaps this sounds simple, but doing everything in love and in ways that serve other people, and making certain that it's not my agenda and I'm not serving myself. So being very conscious of when I'm receiving and coming against pushback, like, and just having conversations with people and building the relationship and the rapport of noticing when I'm pushing too much and I need to veer off or step back for a moment, but allowing that person to then, like, be in charge of everything it is that happens. And so because it's not my agenda, we go as fast or as slow as you want to go. And even if that includes sometimes sitting and there's nothing said at all, or we're sitting and there's crying for 17 minutes, just allowing whatever happens to happen. And then to work from there to build the trust that this moment happened, but it doesn't mean that you have to stay right here. We can work to get you back to a place of functioning and being able to move forward.
I love that it's that holding of space. And I think so many of us have never experienced that, have never experienced the ability to just sit and be with whatever it is that you're feeling without judgment. And also that trust. I think trust is such a huge thing. It's helping a person to, I guess, become vulnerable enough to learn how to trust, which can take some time.
It does. It does. I also like to I don't like putting a title before my name to say Dr. Whoever, because I feel like that in and of itself kind of creates this hierarchy in relationship with people. My experience has been like,
but you are a doctor.
Yeah, yes.
But you are a doctor and you've done the work to be able to support people in the way that you do.
Yes. And for that, it's great. But in terms of like being addressed in a situation where I'm strategizing with people or consulting with people, sometimes in those spaces, I want people to feel like, and the reason that I feel like a title gets attached to that, I feel like sometimes people respond to me differently. Like I could be saying things that I don't even believe myself, but because doctor was with the title, like you went along with it. And so in being in those kinds of spaces, I want people to feel like you are the biggest profession of you. You know you better than I do. And so therefore, you're teaching me about you in this experience, and we're both learning about each other, but by no means, like, I'm not in control of this. You're in control of this experience all the time.
That's right. Which again is something that that many people don't get to experience all the time, where they are put in a position to feel empowered about their own lives. We're told so many things. And a lot of it is kind of shoved down our throats. And so it's beautiful to be in a space where someone is willing to hold space for you, a trusting and safe environment, and also to allow you to make the decisions and allow you to practice that and play with that, and to lean into like what it feels like when I start really talking about what I want and what I don't want and what I want to be different.
I had and I don't know if you have time for a story.
I do.
Okay. So I was teaching a yoga class, and it led to like yoga and meditation. And then it led to kind of like a small circle of women where, you know, we're talking and we're sharing things. And every week there would be this woman that would show up, and every week she would leave and she would be so angry. I mean, she would look at me like I must have just said the most vile thing ever, somewhere in there. And it was even to a point where I would go to other women in there and I would ask them, like, is there something that I need to be doing differently? Because I'm just feeling like a look that I'm getting. And they're like, no, you know, I think everything is fine. And finally, after 2 months, this woman pulled me aside and she said, I've been very angry at you for a very long time. And I asked her why she was angry. And she said, I came to your yoga classes and you would give me the option of different things that I could do on my mat, but you wouldn't tell me what to do. And she explained to me that she was in a relationship, in a marriage where she was being physically abused. And she says that she's always been accustomed to people telling her how and when to move. And she said, and for you to just throw me in a situation and tell me that I'm just supposed to come up with the way in which I moved. And she said, it finally struck me last week what it was that you were doing. And you helped me to see that being able to make my own decisions is a good thing. And so she actually decided to reach out to a community center to get some help for the situation that she was in. And so I'm always reminded of that, like to be mindful of not being the one who is driving the car, like be willing to give up the wheel and be the passenger sometimes, or even just watch people take their own course and be okay with that.
Yeah, just to allow the magic to happen. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you do. Like Dharma Management, what you do through Dharma Management.
Sure. Originally, the Dharma Management has taken a number of turns, or turns, I should say. Where Dharma Management is currently is there's a couple of parts to it. One, my husband is an artist. I represent him. That involves negotiating his contracts, working to keep his intellectual property rights, establishing relationships between he and the community.
Is his art the art that's behind you?
It is.
And what is his name?
Kababi Bayoc. CBABI. Sure.
CBABI.
Bayoc, Bayoc. And so my husband's name was pretty well known in the community that we live in. So when I came in, and I'm a data person, like I'm a trained researcher. And so I wanted to come in and I wanted to see like how these touch points were happening. So my goal was to really evolve his career. And so establishing different relationships and establishing partnerships has been really big. So his career has started to go into a completely different direction. So that has been part of Dharma Management, with coming in and consulting for his business, as well as doing all the other contractual things with him.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Out of that, what has grown is so many artists began reaching out to me, because initially I was really working with a lot of CEOs of companies around what was keeping them from getting to their goals. And everybody wanted to stick to business. Like, Amber, I don't want to stick to anything personal about me. I just want to talk about business. And from Amber's standpoint, I'm like, who you show up as an individual is who you show up as in your office or in front of your employees. So I can't separate the two. And so
how you do one thing is how you do everything.
It really is. And so I'm like, I don't want to say zero interest, but I have a very low interest in, like, I can't do this work and not be me and not push the things that I believe are important. And so the things with CEOs fell lower on the list, because I'm just like, that's not really bringing me joy right now. And so what ended up happening with Kababi is, because he would go online and he would talk about like different things that we were working on and thanking me for different projects. And so some of the artists locally, I guess they get to see like the lineage of Kababi's career from where they knew him into what it looks like now. And so then they began reaching out to me. And And so I told them that I can't represent you because clearly I'm biased. And I really only have an interest to represent one. But what I can do is work with you around, like, business wise, where are you as an artist? Because so many artists are just creatives and they don't want to know the business side of it.
Right.
But working with them around issues with their pricing, which, like you spent 25 hours on a painting and you want to charge $150 for it.
It's yeah.
So I need you to do the math on that. So it's working with them in realizing their value and worth in artists and what they're adding to the world, but also in assisting them with developing their contracts and negotiating their contracts also. And then I have a few small business owners that I do the same kind of work with. Mm-hmm. And then the third arm of Dharma Management is that I get to do speaking engagements for people around issues of not becoming stuck.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful work.
Thank you.
That's beautiful work. And it's interesting because the through line is really about not being stuck.
Absolutely.
In all, Absolutely. As a creative, as a small business owner, as a just a human being walking, not just, or as a human being walking the planet. I wish that you managed more artists because I know a few people popped in my head as you were sharing that. That's a beautiful work. And I love the crown, and I love the crown on Little Girl. And,
Thank you.
The connection to, what is the name of that piece?
This is Princess Peaches. I will move over a bit. And so what this is, my husband has a series of characters called Kababi's All-Stars. And what the All-Stars are, you see them with their fist up, and they all have on Chuck Taylors because my husband loves Chuck Taylors. And their fists are up because they're kids that are from disadvantaged neighborhoods, but they're working to fight for the life that they want. And so that's what the fist represents. So with Princess Peaches, like, this is taken from the Mario Brothers, of course. So blonde hair, but her hair is locked, and this is like an ideal world. But this is the world that she currently lives in with the abandoned buildings. But she's saying that even though this is my community that I'm currently in, this isn't where I necessarily have to stay. But at the same time, I still love my community. And so this is Princess
She's
Peaches.
on a journey.
She's on a journey.
I love that. Thank you for telling the story of that.
You're welcome.
I would love to, so with what's happening in the world today, are there any practices or thoughts, if you are willing to share, if you care to share about them, any thoughts or practices that you can share for those folks who might be feeling the mental and emotional weight of some of what's happening in the world today?
Absolutely. I think remembering your why is always important. Why that becomes important is because you're going to always get messages from people about everything. Everybody has an opinion about everything. And the world is going to continue to change. I don't care who sits in the seat of power. You're not going to always agree with their practices. You're not going to always believe in their belief systems. They're going to make decisions and do things that are a lot differently than maybe the way that you think should happen. But the bottom line is your why. Like, you can't be focused on what's really happening because a lot of times it's always a lot of sleight of hand that's happening. So what appears to be happening up front in the natural, there's a lot that's going on in the background. And if that's your focus, then you're missing out on what it is that you need to do. And bottom line, we always have work to do. Like, we need us as individuals, but there are communities that need us and need us in the way that we show up. And so that has to be our focus. So I love to say, focus on your focus, like focus on your focus, and your focus is you, and your focus is the work that you have to do.
Right. And don't be distracted, because that was what so much of it is.
You can't, that's all it is. It's all sleight of hands. It's smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of good tricks that are happening. There really are. And in the background, you have no idea. You have no idea. And you probably don't want to know. And it's okay that you don't know.
Because that's not your focus.
It's not your focus.
Right.
It's not your focus.
How can we support you?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. One of the things I will say that is really very important to me is the way in which people treat themselves. I feel like I run into so many people that mistreat themselves, who aren't kind to themselves. I feel like one of the ways that you can really support me is to extend kindness to yourself and to make that a practice. Because I believe when you make that a practice for yourself, it becomes the practice that you create to put into the world. So
that's right. I love that. That is brilliant.
thank you.
By being kinder to ourselves. Because I think that people who are kind to themselves and who are joy-filled put that out into the world. That's what you experience when you encounter that person. So we're all in a better place. And
Absolutely.
That's very unique and personal.
Absolutely.
So it's like get unstuck so that the world can be a kinder place for all of us. Get yourself unstuck, you know?
Absolutely. Like,
wow.
You deserve that. You deserve that.
Yeah.
You've earned that.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your work to come and share with us.
Such a pleasure. Such a pleasure.
This has just been a wonderful conversation. I think that we could talk for hours.
Yes, we could.
So many questions. So many questions.
Oh, so do I.
So many topics. So many questions. So many topics. Maybe we do an IG live and kind of continue this conversation at some point.
Oh, LaSawn, I would love to. I would love to.
That would be wonderful. I'd love to do that. I think that it's a good time. I think the timing is good as well. There's so much happening in the world. There are so many people that I think can hear, are ready to hear the medicine that you have to share.
Thank you. I would be honored.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining the Shaping Freedom podcast. I look forward to continuing our conversation in other ways.
Yes.
And thank you.
You're welcome, LaSawn. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be on Shaping Freedom. Thank you so much to your wonderful staff.
Amazing
Yes.
A-team people for sure. Yeah.
And just thank you for this opportunity.
Do you know that we have a line of Shaping Freedom wellness products? Each are beautifully crafted and designed to support you in cherishing your mind, body, emotions, and soul. Carve out a sanctuary in your life with our Luxe sustainable yoga and meditation mats, essential oil candles, and more. Embrace self-care and reflection with every item, lovingly created to enhance your daily practice of spending time on you. Elevate your wellness journey with Shaping Sanctuary Collection because you deserve to feel balanced, nurtured, and inspired. Visit shapingsanctuary.com for more information.
As always, thank you so much for joining me on the Shaping Freedom with LaSawn Basquiat podcast. I want to personally thank Dr. Amber for sharing her insights into how we can get unstuck. I particularly appreciate her pragmatic approach to working through things like how to become more vulnerable in your life, how to get connected to your why, and how to really be focused on what it is that you know you need to focus on, all as ways to help you to move forward and closer to the life that you really want to live. Together, we can really work on unsticking ourselves so that we can contribute in a more positive way to the world around us, and most importantly, to the world within us. I'm your host, LaSawn Basquiat. Please go ahead and share this episode with someone that you feel is stuck in their own lives. Thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to our next conversation.